Welcome to lesson R.1, the present tense in Spanish. This is a cumulative review of all regular, irregular, and stem-changing verbs, as well as reflexives. First, it's important to know the rules when dealing with verbs. There are four main vocabulary terms that help give you a perspective on these rules. Those vocabulary terms are an infinitive, conjugation, gerund, and participle. Basically, an infinitive is the base form of a verb. It's where it ends in an AR, ER, or IR. There is no conjugation. There is no subject attached to it. When we use a conjugation, that means that we've modified that original verb, that infinitive, to denote a subject. So we've put an ending on it. There are two other verb types, a gerund and a participle. And the gerund is a number 2 verb that has the ing on it. So skiing, studying, repeating, playing. The other is a participle, and it's not the past tense, but it's when we put ed at the end of a verb, but we have the helping verb has, have, had. So it would be something like has helped, have assisted, or had eaten, has done. The participle is the second verb in those situations. So knowing the difference between an infinitive, conjugation, gerund, and participle is important. And how those factor into the rules is that in every clause, you are only allowed to have one conjugation. So if you have more than one verb in a clause, there either has to be a conjunction or the second verb must be either in the infinitive, in the gerund, or the participle form. So what are the conjunctions? These are words that help connect two clauses, two parts of a sentence together, or they're used to help list out actions in a series. These conjunctions in Spanish are y, o, pero, porque, and que. Now, y, which is and o, which is or, they have some special forms that we need to be aware of, and it's similar to in English where we have a book, but then we say an elephant. To avoid that redundancy in sound, if you want to say and, but your next word starts with the sound e, you don't want to say e, so you turn it to a. So the letter Y, which means and, becomes E, the letter E. The same thing happens with or, O. You don't want to say o, so to avoid that redundancy, we change the O to an U, and then our next word can start with an O. All right, so regular verbs are exactly that. They're completely regular. They follow a pattern. We must drop the AR, ER, and IR, and then we add the corresponding ending to whatever subject we want to denote. For AR verbs, our endings are o, as, a, amos, ais, an, accent in vosotros. ER and IR verbs are nearly identical, except for the nosotros, vosotros forms. ER verbs are o, es, e, hemos, eis, en, and IR, o, es, e. Here's where it changes, imos, is, and then back to n. Notice that for ER, IR, they also have an accent mark, and the accent mark is on the first vowel or the vowel before the IS. For an IR verb, the only vowel is the I in IS. All right, so we know these regular verb endings, and for the most part, these are going to be the endings that you're always going to use. But we do have some special verbs that will use these endings but have a little twist to them. And the first set of irregulars are called yo irregulars. And they're called yo irregulars for the simple fact their only odd form is in the yo form. These verbs have a normal to form, usted, él, ella, a normal nosotros, a normal vosotros, and ustedes, ellos, and ellas. The only irregular form is yo. Doy, veo, sé, conozco, sco, ho, go. Now, the newer ones might be the CER-CIR verb, and that's to avoid a co sound, so we need to get SCO involved. With her and here, if I just change it to an O, I go from her here to go, so we need to keep the sound ho. Gir doesn't have a G-U-O spelling, so in the yo form, we actually kind of take away the U, and we just go straight to go. But everywhere else, these verbs are 100% normal. So we start back at the beginning, we remove the AR, ER, IR, and we add the normal AR, ER, or IR endings everywhere but the yo form. Now, yo-go verbs are similar. They are also only irregular in the yo form, and these share a commonality in that every single one of them ends in GO. Again, it's only the yo form that is irregular. Every other form, you go back to the original infinitive, drop the AR, ER, IR, and then add your appropriate ending. So, I've grouped these together. Hacer, salir, and poner, straight yo-go verbs. Hago, salgo, pongo. Traer and caer have a little twist to them, where they become IGO. Traigo, caigo. Tener and venir happen to be stem changers, E to IE in all other conjugations, so I grouped them together, tengo and vengo. And then decir and seguir happen to be E to I stem changing verbs in all other forms, so I grouped those two together, digo and sigo. Now, these are all verbs that have a slight irregular form, the yo form. There are some verbs that follow no pattern whatsoever. These are the irregular verbs. The irregular verbs are ser, ir, estar, oír, oler, and verbs that end in UIR. Now, UIR is very specific. This does not pertain to a verb that ends in GUIR. The letter combination GU is almost considered one letter, so GUIR verbs do not fall into this category, but other UIR verbs do, like contribuir. Ser, totally irregular. No rhyme or reason for the conjugations. Soy, eres, es, somos, sois, son, no accents. Ir becomes voy, vas, va, vamos, vais, van, no accents. Estar is in the irregular category only because of the accent marks that it takes on. Estoy, estás, está, estamos, estáis, están. Notice that there are accent marks everywhere but yo and nosotros. Now, oír didn't go into the yo-go category. It technically is a yo-go verb. The yo form ends in go, oigo. However, I put it into the irregular slide because all other conjugations have a Y except for nosotros, vosotros. So there's a lot of moving parts to oír. Oigo, oyes, oye, oímos, oís, oyen. Now comes the verb oler. Oler is to smell. Oler would look very strange to start a conjugation with a UE because it happens to be a stem changer. So Spanish says let's put in a silent letter H because the H is never pronounced. So the yo form is huelo, to form hueles, el, huele, but then in nosotros, vosotros, we almost never have changes there, no irregular forms there. Olemos, oléis, and then back to huelen. And then we have our UIR verbs, like contribuir, destruir, influir. Not GUIR. UIR verbs and have a Y incorporated into their endings. Yo, yes, ye. Then nosotros, vosotros is always normal. Imos and is. And then back to yen. The last type of irregular verb we have only occurs in the boot, or in all conjugations except for nosotros, vosotros, and these are stem changing verbs. There's no way to identify a stem changing verb without simply memorizing them as a stem changer, and further memorizing them as to what category they fall into. Do they change E to IE, E to I, O to UE, or are one verb that changes U to UE? So we need to memorize which verbs fall into this category. What happens is the vowel closest to the infinitive changes in all conjugations except for nosotros, vosotros. So a verb like cerrar, the E is closest to the AR. And a verb like repetir, it's the second E that's closest to the IR. So those are the vowels that are changing, the ones that are closest to the infinitive. Now, once those vowels change, and again, they only change in the yo, tu, el, and ellos form, not in nosotros, vosotros, they go on to use normal AR, ER, and IR endings. Now you'll notice that some of these verbs have an asterisk, and that's because they happen to be yo-go verbs and then stem changers. So we need to remember that they have an extra special yo form, but after that, they just become a normal stem changer. The last type of verb is a reflexive verb. And now, any verb can technically be a reflexive verb. It depends on the type of action that we're talking about. Most verbs are non-reflexive, meaning the action is done by the subject towards someone or something else. So they're doing the action outwards. The arrow's going out to or towards someone or something else. Like, I wash the car. He washes the dogs. The person doing the action is doing it towards someone or something else. But most verbs can be made reflexive, or what's also known as reciprocal. And this means that the action is being done by the subject, but it's being done toward themselves or toward each other. And when we have a verb that is being used in a reflexive or reciprocal manner, we need a reflexive pronoun in front of the conjugation. Now, there are some verbs that are always reflexive just by nature. Sentirse, to feel emotion. You can't force emotion on someone else. It's something that you feel for yourself. So that's always going to be reflexive. But washing, if I wash the car, non-reflexive. If I wash my hands, I'm doing the action to myself. I'm both doing the action of washing and I'm washing my own hands. So it now becomes reflexive. To call, I can call the doctor, non-reflexive. I can call myself a nickname. That's me calling myself a nickname. Or I could say we call each other every night. And that's reciprocal because we're doing the action to each other. I call you, you call me. Reciprocal. So with the reflexive reciprocal verbs, we need to make sure that in front of our verb conjugation, we have a may, te, say, nos, os, or say. And these verbs are really identifiable because they generally have a say at the end of the infinitive form. Because these are the verbs that are commonly reflexive. But you can make a verb like hablar reflexive. All right. Note any questions that you have for class. This ends lesson R.1. See you in class.